China sanctions Hudson Institute and Reagan Library over Tsai's U.S. trip. Peace or war? Taiwan's ex-president suggests a choice after China trip. Beijing to scan ships in Taiwan Strait post Tsai-McCarthy meeting. U.S. House Speaker and Taiwan President present a united front. China's drought may cause a global disaster. China's Ministry of Foreign Affairs announced on April 7th that it would impose sanctions on the Ronald Reagan Presidential Library and the Hudson Institute in retaliation for the meeting between the U.S. House Speaker and Taiwan's president. Reagan Library in Simi Valley, California, was the site of a meeting between President Tsai and Republican House Speaker Kevin McCarthy on April 5th. It was the first time a Taiwan president had met a U.S. speaker on American soil, as reported by CNN. Hudson Institute, the Washington-headquartered think tank, presented a Global Leadership Award to President Tsai in New York City last week. The ministry also cited John Hugh Bush, former executive director of the Reagan Foundation, and Joanne M. Drake, the foundation's chief administrator. Hudson Institute President John P. Walters, Sarah Mae Stern, chair of the Hudson Institute Board of Directors. According to China's announcement, these two organizations would be banned from any transaction, exchange, or cooperation with institutions and individuals in China. Additionally, their key executives would have their assets in China frozen and prohibited from doing business or collaborating with anyone there. The ministry said the Hudson Institute and the Reagan Library have provided a platform and facilitated Tsai's separatist activities, which seriously undermines China's sovereignty and territorial integrity. Walters said that China's Communist Party has a long history of attempting to silence voices, domestically and abroad, that oppose its international aggression and its oppression of the Chinese people. It has not worked before and it will not work now. We stand firmly with Taiwan and against the CCP and its ruthless, genocidal policies. On April 7th, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken said, "In recent years we have seen, for the Chinese leadership, the status quo that brought peace and stability to the Taiwan Strait for decades is no longer acceptable. This has led China to increase pressure and coercive means against Taiwan." At the end of a historic trip to China on April 7th, former Taiwan President Ma Ying-jeou warned relations between the two countries had deteriorated under the current administration and that Taiwan would soon have to decide between peace and war. As reported by Reuters, Ma is the first ex-president of Taiwan to ever travel to China. No current island leader has traveled to China since the Republic of China government retreated in defeat to Taiwan in 1949 after losing a civil war to Mao Zedong's communists. Ma told reporters at Taiwan's main airport after arriving from Shanghai at the end of his 12-day visit to China, "Our administration continues to lead Taiwan into danger. The future is a choice between peace and war." Ma served as the leader of a Kuomintang KMT administration from 2008 to 2016. The party is currently in opposition and supports close ties with China, which claims ownership of the island. However, many Taiwanese have observed with alarm the Hong Kong-China situation and want no reconciliation with China. Ma's visit occurred during a period of heightened tension. China's anger was aroused this week by a meeting between President Tsai and U.S. House Speaker Kevin McCarthy during the Taiwan leader's visit to the U.S. The Democratic Progressive Party, DPP, Tsai's party in power, criticized Ma's trip. Still, he claimed it demonstrated that Taiwan and China could cooperate because both are part of a single China, even though each may have its own definition. In Taiwan's best interest, according to Ma, sharing a common political basis with China would be possible. In a statement, Tsai's DPP said that Ma had turned into an accomplice of Beijing's One China tenet and had missed the chance to preserve Taiwan's sovereignty. Tsai has proposed negotiations with China, but Beijing has rejected her because it sees her as a separatist.
The Chinese government has announced that it will spend 3 days patrolling and inspecting sea vessels in the central and northern segments of the Taiwan Strait. According to Reuters, the plan was announced on the WeChat account of China's Fujian Maritime Safety Administration on April 5th. It said officials would conduct on-the-spot checks of direct cargo ships and construction vessels on both sides of the Taiwan Strait. While the operation came after President Tsai Ing-wen met with U.S. House Speaker Kevin McCarthy on April 4th, the statement claimed it was to ensure safety and orderly activities. The inspection is to be carried out in areas such as the Pingtan-Taiwan direct container route, the passenger route of the Small Three Links, the customary route of vessels in the Taiwan Strait, the areas with high traffic of commercial and fishing vessels, as well as areas where illegal sand mining activities are frequent. Taiwan's Kinmen and Matsu Islands and Chinese cities are linked by the Small Three Links passenger route. The move has sparked protests from the self-ruling island. The Maritime and Ports Bureau of Taiwan's Transport Ministry said it had informed relevant shipping operators to reject China's demand and promptly alert Taiwan's Coast Guard for help. It said in a statement late April 5th, if the mainland side insists on taking one-sided actions, it will create obstacles to normal exchanges between the two sides. We will be forced to take corresponding measures. Despite Beijing's repeated threats, Taiwan President Tsai-Ing-wen and U.S. House of Representatives Speaker Kevin McCarthy met and presented a unified front in California on Wednesday, April 5th, reported CNN. For Taiwan, the high-level bipartisan meeting was a timely endorsement from the United States. When Nancy Pelosi visited Taipei last August, Beijing held days of large-scale drills and fired missiles over the island. This time, China's foreign ministry condemned the meeting and pledged to take strong and resolute measures, although that has not yet translated into any concrete military response. Besides, American and Taiwanese officials have recounted numerous precedents of a Taiwanese leader transiting through the U.S. to avoid provoking Beijing. Their meeting took place at the Ronald Reagan Presidential Library and was unofficial but, of course, political. McCarthy said, America's support for the people of Taiwan will remain resolute, unwavering, and bipartisan. Tsai responded, noting that we're stronger when we are together. Standing beside McCarthy with Reagan's Air Force One in the background, Tsai said, in our efforts to protect our way of life, Taiwan is grateful to have the United States by our side. She added, the constant and unwavering support reassured the people of Taiwan that we are not isolated, and we are not alone. Austin Wang, assistant professor of political science at the University of Nevada, Las Vegas, said, if the meeting is a cornerstone to speed up further economic and military cooperation, then it is worth the risk. McCarthy later tweeted, we must continue arms sales to Taiwan and make sure such sales reach Taiwan on time. We must also strengthen our economic cooperation, particularly with trade and technology. The senior meeting followed Taiwan President Tsai Ing-wen's trip to Central America to meet allies in Guatemala and Belize to promote democracy and prosperity. Taiwan is due to elect a new president next year. Tsai has served 2 terms, and her vice president, William Lai, is expected to run for office this time.
China is on the verge of a water disaster. The country consumes 10 billion barrels of water daily, and decades of economic growth and population explosion have pushed groundwater in northern China to an alarmingly low state. China's water crisis is getting so bad that it could cause a global disaster in the near future. Foreign Affairs said that, given China's enormous importance to the global economy, the potential water disruptions emanating from China would quickly take effect through food, energy, and raw material markets worldwide and create economic and political instability for years to come. China is thirsty for water. According to the article, the per capita water supply around the North China Plain, including 3 provinces in Henan, Hebei, and Shandong, at the end of 2020 is nearly 50% lower than the standard definition of the United Nations. Other major cities, including Beijing, Shanghai, and Tianjin, are also at similar or even lower lows. Water pollution has become so widespread that it has become a normal thing in China. According to China's Ministry of Ecology and Environment, 19% of China's surface water is unsuitable for human consumption. About 7% is considered unfit for any use. Groundwater is even worse, with about 30% deemed unfit for consumption and 16% unsuitable for use. Meanwhile, China's frantic development of agriculture and industry has released countless polluting waste into groundwater over the past 3 decades. Data from the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations shows that China uses nearly 2.5 times more fertilizers and 4 times more pesticides than the US, despite having 25% less arable land. For decades, the Beijing government has often chosen to hide the country's environmental problems to avoid backlash backlash from world public opinion and prevent damage to its leadership. And obviously, this has affected other countries, and likely the world will be unprepared if such a disaster occurs. According to NASA's GRACE satellite, the aquifers under the delta in northern China are already depleted. They are at alarmingly low levels in the North China Plain and may be depleted within the next 20 to 30 years. In some cases, groundwater levels have dropped so low that aquifers have collapsed, causing land subsidence, perhaps explaining why China is home to the most sinkholes in the world. Water crisis in China could cause a global disaster. Foreign Affairs reports that despite innovative programs to improve water availability, some scholars estimate that water supplies could force a demand reduction of 25% by 2030, a situation that, by definition, according to Foreign Affairs, will cause significant adjustments in society. Of course, when water resources in plains like the North China Delta are depleted, droughts will be worse, which means less food production. The North China Plain produces 60% of China's wheat, 45% of its corn, 35% of its cotton, and 64% of its peanuts. It grows wheat with an annual output of more than 80 million tons, on par with Russia's annual production, and corn production of 125 million tons, 3 times the output of Ukraine before the war. According to satellite data, between 2003 and 2010, northern China lost as much groundwater as Beijing consumes annually, making it difficult for farmers to find new water sources. If the North China Plain suffered a 33% crop failure due to water shortages, China would need to import about 20% of the world's corn and 13% of the world's wheat. Foreign Affairs said that although China has accumulated the largest grain reserves in the world, it has not been immune from yield shortages for many years. As a result, China's food traders, including large state-owned enterprises such as COFCO and Sinograin, will likely be forced to access global markets to secure additional supplies. Food prices, as a result, would skyrocket in high-income countries while making food for hundreds of millions of people in poorer countries economically inaccessible. China's power shortage will also directly impact the global supply chain, as industrial facilities account for more than 65% of electricity use in China. To mitigate the direct human impact of widespread, uncontrolled power outages, party officials will likely have to close industrial facilities to reduce the load on the grid, as they did during power shortages in 2021. The decree blackout will disrupt some critical material supplies. China is the world's largest producer of aluminum, ferrosilicon, lead, manganese, magnesium, zinc, rare earth metals, and many other special metals and materials. Outages in even one region can affect global markets, as European car makers discovered in late 2021 that power shortages hit factory operations. Magnesium smelting in Shanxi province accounts for about 50% of global production. As magnesium inventories plummeted, prices skyrocketed to 7 times their levels at the start of the year, and European industrial consumers have called on governments to act to secure supplies. Former British diplomat and China expert Charlie Parton noted in 2018, China can print money but not water. As China continues to overexploit groundwater in the face of increasingly volatile weather, the country moves closer each year to a catastrophic water event. This result, regrettably, will affect not only China.